Xisheng, the scripture of Western Ascension. Laozi ascended to the West to open up the Tao in India. He was called Master Gu, skilled at entering non-action. Without beginning or end, he exists continuously. Thus steadily ascending, he followed his way and reached the frontier. The guardian of the pass, Yin Shi, saw his sagely energy. He purified himself and waited upon the guest, who in turn transmitted the Tao and the virtue to him. He arranged it in 2 sections. He said, "I'll tell you the essentials of the Tao. The Tao is nature. Who practices can attain it. Who hears can speak about it. Who knows does not speak. Who speaks does not know. Language is formed when sounds are exchanged. Thus, in conversation, words make sense. When one does not know the Tao, words create confusion. Therefore, I don't hear, don't speak. I don't know why things are." It can be compared to the knowledge of musical sound. One becomes conscious of it by plucking a string. Though the mind may know the appropriate sounds, yet the mouth is unable to formulate them. Similarly, the Tao is deep, subtle, wondrous. Who knows it does not speak. On the other hand, one may be conscious of musical sounds, sad melodies. One then dampens the sounds to consider them within. Then, when the mind makes the mouth speak, one speaks, but does not know. Laozi said, "The Tao is deep and very profound, an abyss of emptiness and non-being. Though you may hear its doctrine, in your mind you don't grasp its subtlety. Why is this so? The written word does not exhaust speech, and by relying on scriptures and sticking to texts, your learning remains on the same intellectual level. Rather, you must treasure it, recollect it within, meditate on it, and consider it carefully. The Tao of nature will not wait for you." Thereupon she bowed deeply several times. "May I ask how I should go about learning it?" Laozi said, "To be skilled in the arts of writing, one must master its patterns. To be skilled in discussing and explaining things, one must master language. Only by studiously pursuing it will one attain the Tao. Do what is proper, without fixations, and the proper naturally comes to stay with you. If you don't get caught in anything false, the false will leave you naturally. Thus, when I speak of non-action, I mean that the Tao will assist you naturally. Who is unskilled at sacrificing will be avoided by the demons and spirits. Who does not labor his spirits will receive life without bounds. Never advance, never retreat. With whom would you get into exhortations? By acting right, you will cause things to be right. Isn't this nature?" Yin Shi thereupon bowed deeply and said, "May I now beg to hear your orders?" Laozi said, "Practice it very carefully. Cherish it like a treasure. I will soon travel afar, so don't expect to meet me again." Yin Shi was deeply moved by these words. Thus he excused himself from his duty on the pass, pleading illness, gave up his official position, and withdrew in solitariness to a chamber of emptiness and leisure. In deep serenity he meditated on the Tao, concentrated his will, and guarded the One. In ultimate emptiness and original non-being, the secrets of the One can be pervaded. With complicated phrases and words of marvel, inner intention cannot be revealed. He recited the scripture 10,000 times. He attained inner sincerity in his essence and pervasion in his meditation. By practicing the true and attaining his self, he could pervade the mystery. Through discussing the non-ultimate source, he could attain spirit immortality. Laozi said, "The image of the Tao is without shape or end. Vague and obscure, it is not, and yet it is. It can be compared to the seed of a tree. Before it sprouts, one cannot see branches, leaves, or roots. Then it is joined with earth, water, fire, and wind. The energies of the 4 seasons cause it to grow. Energy is the ground of all life. It comes together, coagulates, and gradually becomes solid. Thus there are different tastes and various shapes, such as sweet, bitter, pungent, salty, and sour. When energy moves, there are the many and the few. The strong and the weak are not the same, indeed. They arise together, yet differ in name and appearance. Each brings forth its own intention and karmic cause. Thus, they have different inner natures and natural movements. They develop different bodies and selves. They are raised through the Tao of yin and yang, thus following separate ways. They are yet akin. The Tao, when manifested in life, is not of one kind. All people are not the same. Originally, they come forth from emptiness and non-being. Instigation and arousal causes essence and spirit to be born. The idea can be compared to the making of a sound. The string is plucked by the movement of a hand. Gong, shang, jiao, sheng, yu. The 5 tones originate in the breath blown in and out from the mouth. Self, words, and mind are the foundations of life. They come originally from the Tao. Fundamentally, they rest in emptiness and tranquility. Thus I say, the Tao is nature. Just as the 5 tones are first plucked and only then connected with music and form, scattered yang becomes light. Spread out energy forms the 6 roots of the senses. From this life and death arise, because the Tao is scattered and divided. Thus people leave the root in order to rush after the branches. The transformations of the Tao are pointers to impermanence. It wishes you to return to its truth. Laozi said, I told you about the Tao as the origin of life. I showed you that this is nature. We got as far as the origin of the myriad beings who interact with each other in their feelings and behavior. As it disperses, it comes together again. As it is exterminated, it comes back to life. First, the 5 agents develop. Yin and yang begin to align, revolving round and round in transformations. Then the essence of beings is formed. I meditate on this Tao as originating in obscurity and darkness. The ignorant don't know otherwise. They merely claim to go along with life. You don't have the eyes of the Tao, so how would you know about the numinous quality of life? Heaven, earth, people, and all beings are empty and latent, yet they fill up the big bag. One by one they are born from non-being. Together they emerge, yet different are their names. Similarly, right is founded on wrong. Both are valid only when applied properly. What characters point to are not themselves characters. To understand them, you have to know what they mean. Always deliberate with the enlightened. Never contend with the ignorant. Always choose the proper teaching. Never lend your ear to falsehood. How do you know falsehood? Because it will cause you to be distracted by beings. How do you know ignorance? Because there is no careful distinction of words and feelings. Use the Tao to question the Tao. Use the Scriptures to question the Scriptures. If questions don't have roots and branches, you know the people who ask them are ignorant and utterly in the dark. Such people only know how to pursue personal happiness. They don't realize how much this will entangle them in suffering. They only know how to nourish their selfhood. They don't realize how much this will injure their bodies. Like little babies, they only indulge in nourishing themselves with richness and delight. Then, when they suddenly see that the body is going to die, they finally realize that they can't live forever. You must not pursue opulence and brightness. Then you can attain eternal life. You have some inherent intention toward the wondrous, but it is spoiled by desire. Like father and son feel deep empathy for each other, which is not merely because they listen to each other. It's no use to wail and complain. Far and near people will laugh. Silence the bad and raise the good. This is what the gentleman esteems. Laozi said, false and proper, teachings and words in turn respond to nature. Thus there is good and bad fortune, which both develop in accordance with the seeds or roots that one plants. Whatever is, whatever comes, you can distinguish seed and kernel. The Tao, though quite different from this, in its words, may be said to be either true or untrue. The untrue Tao teaches you to nourish the body. The true Tao teaches you to nourish the spirit. Spirit realized, the Tao pervaded, you can freely be gone, or exist, in this world. The spirit can make the body fly. It can move mountains. The body ultimately is mere dust and ashes. How do we become aware of this? Ears and eyes, sound and color keep one always in a state of tension. The joys of nose and mouth, Fragrances and tastes are only sources of dissatisfaction. The self is the root of all distress. It experiences pain and irritation, heat and cold. The intention arises through yearning for some state of the body. It means melancholy, ill will, anxiety, distress. I am a prisoner of my personal body. Thus I know the self is great suffering. Observe the past. Look at the present. Who could ever keep his body whole? Even I have white hair, growing weaker as I ripen in years. Thus I cast off the ordinary, reject and leave the common world, embrace the primordial source and guard the one, go beyond all, and attain spirit immortality. As long as you cannot guard it, just sit still with the pulsation and the senses. Once you have attained a state of immobility, your spirit and inner numinous quality will be at peace. Once you then decrease desires, all affairs will be just perfect. Once established in non-action, you will know how to keep your will strongly set. Now, I will tell you about it, make it clear, and explain it in detail. I will analyze it for you so that you can distinguish the true from the untrue. You should receive the teaching carefully, value the Tao, and practice it with greatest diligence. The Tao will emerge as understanding. The scriptures become the vanguard of your learning. Then you can pass it on to people who can practice, disregarding wealth and poverty. You teach them with refinement and the arts, without considering if they are strange or near to you. So they receive it and can practice, patterned as you have it for these others. In study or in teaching, you never lose the truth of the Tao. Laozi said, "Heaven, earth, people, and all beings originally contain the primordial source of the Tao. They emerge together from the Grand Immaculate. From the first beginning of emptiness and non-being, they come from the radiance of essence, flickering softly, from supreme mystery, subtle and wondrous. It can be compared to a dam 10,000 miles in height. It has gushing, gurgling streams beneath. Looking down, they seem all turbid and confused. Looking closer, there are countless sand grains on the bottom. Obscure in the extreme, utterly undifferentiated, we don't know where they come from. As in a person recently deceased, one cannot see the numinous spirit soul. It is merged with the engulfing power of yin, and yang can no longer shine forth to make it distinct. Look at the past and the future as you look at the present. If you can't even understand that, how will you know about not existing or being alive? Your state is like that of a deaf mute who cannot speak people's language. How could he hear the notes plucked on the lute? Talented and analytical, you have a certain wisdom, receiving the teaching by word of mouth. But while you claim to have penetrated the innermost part of the Tao, you cannot intuit its true inner sense. Therefore, if you have lost the foundation of life, how could you know the primordial source of the Tao? Laozi said, "If you want to practice my Tao, you must first know about the source of the highest insight. Even wisdom doesn't arise by itself, but like all other things must have its underlying cause. Everything has a foundation for its fate, a connecting point for fate and life's conditions. Join the Tao, and the Tao will come to you. Join virtue, and you will reach its root. In former lives, one didn't study or ask questions, so in this life, one again lives in the common world. For this reason, one experiences gain and loss, and can't delight in the patterns of the Tao. Greed, desire, profit, glory, and official favor, when received, seem the grace of fate or the fruits of toil. When in addition there is wealth and material security, one will never fall into humble circumstances and poverty. Yet then one may feel much anger and impatience, and be without any stable foundation in one's mind. One may study, yet without an enlightened teacher, how could one ever resolve one's doubts? My Tao is like fine hair. Who would be able to understand it? From the beginnings of past generations I have been changing many times, innumerable as fine dust. I have been moving along for years, amounting to kalpas. I feel this is extreme suffering and toil. I study what cannot be studied. I just begin to see things in the light of nature. All flourishing depends on an underlying solid ground. just as the stem and the leaves grow from the roots of the trees. By depending on the earliest ancestor of the Tao, you will know the starting point of the primordial source of the world's beginning. You should come to see it without recourse to outer phenomena. Never concern yourself with them. Laozi said, "I will repeat my instructions. Receive them carefully. In the Tao, make non-being the highest. In virtue, make kindness your master. In ceremony, make social responsibility your inner feeling. In acting, make grace your friend. In benevolence, make advantage your ideal. In faith, make efficaciousness your goal. In the world of constructs, these things are there, yet even though they are there, they will only lead men astray. Thus you know that the world is superficial. It is full of splendor and ornaments that soothe you. Words rush ahead, even of flying dragons, yet actions limp in the wake even of lame turtles. When kindness, social responsibility, ceremony, and faith are lost, the Tao and the virtue are also discarded. They perish and decay. When these social virtues are not substantiated by the Tao, they, to the contrary, will be supported only by material wealth. Compare it to the image in a mirror. You can see, but not get a hold of it. Words are like the response of an echo. How could one ever catch the response of an echo? How could one ever catch the sound of wind? The world of constructs holds on to the teachings in this manner. Such delusion has been going on for a long time since. Among the people and beings under heaven, who could alone be permanent master? They continue in handed-down delusion. They revolve in mutual stimulation. The false and untrue have invaded truth. Emptiness and non-being appear as if they really existed. The untrue is no longer distinguished from the true. This error is prolonged by greed and profit. What is considered right at any given moment is impermanent and will perish again. Foolishly and blindly people cling to their error, just as fire that is brought forth from wood will turn back on it and consume it. Laozi said, "The words of the sages are, observe the Tao through the pattern of how existence comes to life. Thus it is said, the Tao is nature. When the eyes see something, the mind is agitated. The mouth then expresses words formed in the mind. The nose is pervaded by wind and breath. The nose and the mouth are their gates. Respiration is the residence of life. The life of the self depends on it. You can compare it to grain, to grass, to trees. Following the four energies, they develop in accordance with the seasons. When energy departs, the living die. With its increase or decrease, there appears radiance, or disease. Thus there is life and death. Yet this is not as good as being at peace in a state of non-action. In non-action, nothing is actively done. How would errors or transgressions come about? You must never develop greed on behalf of your personal or your physical body, nor must you ever find fault with acting purposefully. If the five agents did not overcome each other, the myriad beings could all be complete. The myriad beings are not permanent. They are completed, yet don't stay whole for long. The three luminaries have neither light nor darkness. Heaven and earth are forever radiant." Laozi said, "Observe all things as manifestations of the Tao. Visualize the spirits in meditative imagination. Think of the energy of the Tao and of the three luminaries as ordering yourself from within. Flickering softly, like an image between dream and waking, the spirit light suddenly appears and vanishes. Keep your will dispassionate and remain in non-action. Meditate with concentrated imagination and active conscious thinking. You will then establish freedom from desires and no longer know the difference between ordinary, i.e., acquisitive, and meditative thought. Sometimes energy will arise that is still coarse. Then you know that you are still troubled by numerous affairs. When affairs arise, your body will be agitated. When there is agitation, you will get involved with outward schemes. Outward schemes and thoughts are the beginning of peril. Who enters peril will not be steady. Not being steady means that one will weaken, and weakness will lead to a shortened life. Observe sounds and sights on the basis of your personal body. Then beings and affairs won't easily crowd in. Once you attach specific labels to sounds and sights, you will be seduced by them. It all rests with greed and desire. These are what lead into calamity. Greed is a great sickness indeed. It has been around for a very long time. It sneaks in subtly, gradually accumulates, and once it's there, it can't be cured by herbs or needles. Reject all that your self or intention might desire, and you will naturally guard clarity and purity. The practice of the great sages consists in just that, never longing for what others have. In being, they can always turn to non-being. In non-being, always to being. Laozi said, "All that is said in scriptures and precepts, all that is prescribed in laws and statutes is powerful, awe-inspiring, and openly declared. It is not as good as the wondrous and the subtle. The full is not as good as the empty. The numerous is not as good as the rare. The exuberant and multiple will die an early death. To be hectic is much worse than to come a little late. All that flourishes must decay. All that prospers must decline. The sage gives up all knowledge and acts in non-action. He speaks by saying nothing. He does things by never undertaking anything." How do we know this? The even is not as good as the odd. The many is not as good as the few. What kind of wisdom is harder to follow? What kind of kindness is harder to attain? The meaning of this makes sense to few. To know without knowledge, this is the pivot of the Tao. Emptiness ends, and non-being begins. What use is it to be a flying immortal? The great Tao is vast and open. There is nothing not structured or surrounded by it. If you can understand that, you will see that right ultimately returns to wrong. Carefully examine all the words of the scriptures. Who knows can pursue. Laozi said, "Words of the Tao are deep and wonderful. The precepts and the scriptures are similarly esoteric. Heaven, earth, and all beings are born from the One. If you can understand that, you will know the difference between emptiness and reality. If you don't understand that, you will look at it and see no difference. As long as your will is fixed on existence, your non-action will be ailing. You will be entangled by existence and have years without end. Words of the Tao are subtle and deep. While you haven't understood them, just try to grasp their basic meaning and observe the precepts without fail. First, lessen all desires. Then, never let your intention run loose. Leisurely stay in a tranquil place. Practice meditation in a chamber of retreat. The cinnabar scriptures of 10,000 scrolls are not as good as guarding the One. Yet the scriptures are not irrelevant. They do, after all, contain reality and emptiness. Whenever they speak of being, there is always also non-being, but you cannot as yet distinguish this. Whenever they speak of non-being, there is always also being, but you cannot as yet decide on that. Therefore, just practice according to instructions, coming and going with the rhythm of the world. Teachings in the name of the Tao can be true or bogus, just as fortune can be good and bad. There are public and private situations of shame. Who understands this can see the delicate dividing line. Why divine the past and foresee the future? Better to just remain simple. Laozi said, "Emptiness and non-being bring forth nature. Nature brings forth the Tao. The Tao produces the One. The One produces the myriad beings. The myriad beings embrace the One and come into being. They attain the subtle and wonderful and come to life." Human beings all have the treasure of long life, but they don't preserve it. Rather, they develop desires and value personal glory. This is what we call rejecting original life, the Tao of heaven and earth. Laozi said, "Emptiness and non-being are vague and obscure. They are the root of the Tao. The myriad beings assemble at the root. This is the primordial source of the Tao. It is within oneself, never forgotten. I will be silent about it." Laozi said, "I was born from emptiness and developed in non-being. What gives me life is the spirit. What kills me is the mind. Mind and intention are afflictions to me. Thus, if I am no mind, what do I know? I recollect the time when I was not yet born. Then I didn't have a self. It is only through the accumulation of energy, the assembly of blood, that my body came to be. My body is the carriage of the spirit, the habitation of the spirit, the host of the spirit. When the host is tranquil and at peace, the spirit will remain. When the host is agitated and moved, the spirit will leave. Therefore, the sage does not have a common mind. His desire is to return to the beginning, to the state before he was born. Before human beings are born, how can they have a self? Without a self, what suffering would there be, and what desires? Therefore, put yourself outside and visualize the spirits. Then, nothing but an essential brilliance will remain. Once Tao and virtue are joined in one, you will pervade the Tao. Laozi said, "Those who acted with the Tao in the days of old all based themselves on nature. Thus their Tao was permanent, but when you try to force it, it will not come about. Why is this so? Because trying involves having yearning and thoughts. This goes against the Tao. Therefore, one finds the usefulness of the bellows and the flute in their being empty. Empty or real, being or non-being, square or round, big or small, long or short, wide or narrow. Whichever you encounter, listen to what others say, but never enter into contention with them. The way the good person acts in the world can be compared to the bellows. He never contends with others. His virtue always depends on the Tao. This is because he is empty and void and utterly free from desires. Desires are the root of all misfortune and harm. Non-being is the source of heaven and earth. Nobody knows that this is the root. Nobody knows that this is the source. The sage gives up all desires and enters non-being. Thus he supports the self." Laozi said, "People usually consider satisfaction through sounds and sights the highest possible happiness. They do not know that satisfaction of sounds and sights is the basis for misfortune. Therefore, the sage never desires anything and returns to freedom from desires." Laozi said, "The Tao is an empty and latent being. It may be empty, yet it will become real. It is empty and yet full. Heaven received the one energy. Luminously it became utterly pure. Then the energy descended and transformed. It brought forth the myriad beings. Their physical shapes are all different. Therefore, the sage knows Tao, virtue, and primal chaos. He becomes one with mystery and wonder. He also knows that heaven and earth are clear and tranquil, that they both continue to guard the one. Thus, join your mind with heaven, and there will be no more knowledge. Join your personal body with the Tao, and there will be no more physical structure. Then the Tao of heaven will flourish. To attain this, control your will and intention, and abandon all yearning and worries. It leaves and cannot be pursued. It remains and cannot be driven out. When it reaches far, it goes beyond the non-ultimate, yet it cannot be followed. When it stays close, it is right within oneself, yet it cannot be seen. Therefore, the ruler, to the end of his life, will not look, not listen, not speak, not eat. He will harbor his knowledge and embrace the mystery. You may want to look at it and cannot see it. You may want to listen to it and cannot hear it. You may want to speak of it and cannot phrase it. You may want to eat it and cannot taste it. It is utterly serene and obscure. There is no way you can experience it sensually. Therefore, return to non-being. If you attain a state of permanent purity, tranquility, and non-action, non-being will be recovered naturally. Thus you go back to before you were born, and no longer have a self. Nourish the self in non-action. Then you will make your body and physical structure whole. Share in the abundance and fullness of heaven and earth. Thus you will live forever. Laozi said, "To sympathize with others as a human being is not as good as sympathizing with oneself. To sympathize with oneself is not as good as loving the spirit. To love the spirit is not as good as harboring the spirit. To harbor the spirit is not as good as preserving the self. To preserve the self means to live forever." Lao Tzu said, "Spirit gives life to the body completes spirit. Without spirit, the body cannot give life to itself. Without the body, spirit cannot complete itself. Body and spirit join in harmony. They give life to each other. They complete each other. Spirit always loves human beings, but human beings don't love spirit. Therefore, abandon sageliness, discard wisdom, and return to unknowing." Lao Tzu said, "The sage finds permanent peace in being at one with heaven and earth. Since he is at peace, he can join demons and spirits. Ordinary folk all seek peace in what by nature is not peaceful. Thus, they are always without peace. The way of heaven is to diminish the full and overflowing, to strengthen the empty and the void. It lies in diminishing strength and flourishing in advancing the feeble and the weak. Lessen yearning and worrying, and return to the state of a child. Block off false wisdom, and attain the simplicity of the sage. Therefore, keeping with the world can be called nourishing the mother. By always loving the mother, the self will live forever." Lao Tzu said, "When the self is emptiness, the myriad beings will arrive. When the mind is non-being, the harmonious energy will return. Therefore, who is skilled at nourishing the self will hide as self, in his self, and never be lost. He will hide as a person among persons, and never be seen. Thus, if the ruler is to govern his country, he should first die to his country. When he dies to it, but does not perish, then his country will prosper greatly. The people will not dare to disperse, but will grow in number. If you know permanence, your actions will return to it. Common folk are happy and delighted to use life as long as it lasts. Thereby they get agitated and lose it, and their lifespans are easily exhausted. The world is a great thing. It exists continuously. It is dark and obscure, and cannot be known. Knowing it is rejecting it. Desiring it is leaving it. Approaching it is separating from it. Therefore, the sage does not rely on the world. He does not rely on demons and spirits, nor does he rely on the myriad beings. Rather, he always makes emptiness his self, and non-being his mind. These two are called the self of no self, the mind of no mind. Thus the spirit is guarded. Guard the spirit and pervade all in mystery. This is union with the Tao." Lao Tzu said, "The wise man is free from yearning. He never feels the insecurity of worries, always remaining in emptiness and non-action, staying serene and cultivating his body and physical structure. Thus the myriad beings are nurtured. Those who are part of the transformations develop greed for the gems of the world, arousing their feelings. Then armed rebellions break out in the four directions, and disaster arises in the country. The country is shaken and in disorder. The people are weary and exhausted. The people are the foundation of the country. When the people are exhausted and leave, the country is shattered. This we call giving away the treasure of its boundlessness, inviting instead robbery and profiting from the work of axes and spears. Thus the sage rests in non-action and no affairs. He only desires to keep the people of his country at peace. Thus it is said, 'Just know how to guard the one, and the myriad affairs are done. In a state of no mind, virtue will remain. The demons and spirits will come to serve.'" Lao Tzu said, "My life is my own. It does not depend on heaven and earth. I don't see, don't hear, don't know. Spirit does not leave myself, and I am forever one with the Tao. Heaven and earth are divisions of the one energy. When properly regulated, this naturally guards the root. But never imitate the kind of goodness practiced by the common folk. Never behave according to benevolence and righteousness, loyalty and faith. Never behave with reverence and respect, or act according to petty loves and desires. Then the myriad beings will all come to profit. Always remain serene and in non-action. Then the great Tao will return. Thus the spirit man has no radiance, and the sage has no fame." Lao Tzu said, Now, weapons are a great misfortune in the world. They are not a treasure of the country. One may treasure them, but must not use them, because using them will result in agitation and disasters, such as the destruction of the country and the loss of the people. Therefore, the sage cherishes the subtle and wonderful, embraces roughness and simplicity, and never dares to act deliberately or in any way interfere or contend with the world. There may be wild beasts, but they will not attack him. There may be wasps and scorpions, worms and snakes, but they will not bite him. There may be soldiers and weapons, but they will not injure him. Because he has accumulated virtue, and he pervades the mystery, none in the world can do him any harm. Laozi said, "In the world, none is softer and weaker than the one energy. Within the one energy, none is softer and weaker than the Tao. Because the Tao is weak and soft, it can embrace and enwrap heaven and earth. It can pervade and penetrate the myriad beings. Soft brings forth hard. Weak produces strong, yet none in the world knows its root. The base from which the opposites begin, originally. For this reason, being takes non-being as its mother. Non-being takes emptiness as its mother. Emptiness takes the Tao as its mother, and the Tao has nature as its foundation." Laozi said, "The reason why people undervalue life and die early is only that they themselves cause it to be so. It is not that heaven and earth destroy them, that demons or spirits do them any harm. It is because they develop knowledge, and their bodies are agitated. Non-being produces being. No shape produces shape. How much more should this rule apply in the development and destruction of human affairs? If people want to live long, they must cut off their emotions and get rid of their desires. Mind and intention are bondage to life. It is necessary to return to purity. Body and spirit joined in harmony means eternal life." Laozi said, "Although people live in the world, their thinking should not rest with the world. Although people live in a country, their thinking should not rest with the country. Although people live in a village, their thinking should not rest with the village. Although people live in a family, their thinking should not rest with the family. Although the spirit lives in the self, the spirit should not rest with the self. Who practices this can be called a man of the Tao." Laozi said, "Suffering arises without conscious thinking. Misfortune arises minutely and with subtlety. Good arises from evil. Profit arises from harm. Big arises from small. Hard arises from easy. High arises from low. Far arises from near. Out arises from in. Noble arises from humble. Movement arises from rest. Prosperity arises from decline. Yin arises from yang. Therefore, being and non-being arise from each other. Empty and real bring forth one another. Thus being returns to being. Non-being returns to non-being." Laozi said, "Human beings are within the Tao. The Tao is within human beings. Fish are within water. Water is within fish. When the Tao leaves, people die. When water runs dry, fish perish. Thus the sage knows that he will return to the state before he was born. He abandons pride and luxury and does away with melancholy and yearning. For this reason, when his physical body vanishes, his spirit remains. The whole world returns. Without action and free from affairs, the country is stable and the people rich. Preserving the Tao and cultivating the permanent is what we call union with the mystery." Laozi said, "When the one who possesses the country is deeply rooted, heaven and earth will cover and support it. The myriad beings will be raised and nurtured. Gold and jade will form treasures. Without deliberate accumulation, they will remain. Who puts heaven and earth outside will own heaven and earth. Who puts his self outside will preserve his life. Therefore, the ruler is skillful where others are clumsy. He lives long where others do not. He enjoys what others do not. He is happy when others are not. He does what others don't do. He trusts in what others don't trust. He practices what others don't practice. Thus the Tao and virtue are complete in him. Lao Tzu said, "The Tao is not only within me, rather the myriad beings all have it. The myriad beings don't know about it, but the Tao naturally rests with them. Common folk are all born through attaining the spirit. They don't know about it, but the spirit naturally lives in them. The ruler lets his virtue spread to the 100 families, but they don't know that they receive the virtue of the ruler. Thus the sage harbors the spirit within and never lets his material soul escape. When the mother is kept, the child is complete, and the people will increase and prosper. They will protect the country. Mystery and emptiness accumulate to fullness. Life lasts forever. The people may vainly know heaven, earth, and the myriad beings. However, unless they know where they originated, and that they will return to the origin, this remains great ignorance indeed." Lao Tzu said, "The Tao of self-cultivation means to first hide with heaven and earth, to rest quietly with the beginning of the myriad beings. The sage pervades the mystery and primordial source, merges his energy and conscious thinking, and thus preserves his self. The commoner employs emotions and love, greed and desire to preserve his self. These two are the same in that they are living beings preserving their selves. They differ in their Tao and their virtue." Lao Tzu said, "The Tao and the virtue, heaven and earth, water and fire, the myriad beings, high mountains, deep ravines, they all have where they return to. The Tao does not desire emptiness, yet emptiness naturally returns there. Virtue does not desire spirit, yet spirit naturally returns there. Heaven does not desire clarity, yet clarity naturally returns there. Earth does not desire turbidity, yet turbidity naturally returns there. Moisture does not desire water, yet water naturally returns there. Dryness does not desire fire, yet fire naturally returns there. The myriad beings do not desire to become visible as bodies, yet naturally they appear as such. High mountains and big swamps do not desire flying birds or tigers and wolves, yet these animals naturally return there. Deep ravines, rivers, and oceans don't desire fish, sea turtles, or dragons, yet these creatures naturally return there. If human beings are empty, latent, and free from action, they may not desire the Tao, yet the Tao naturally returns to them. Seen from this angle, how could the individual nature of beings not be natural?" Lao Tzu said, "Whether one of the 100 families does anything good, I don't know. Whether one of the 100 families does anything evil, I don't know. Whether anybody practices loyalty or good faith, I don't know. Accumulate goodness, and good energy will come to you. Accumulate evil, and evil energy will come to you. Thus the sage says, I embrace the beginning of the world and preserve the mother of the world. The more the myriad beings follow this, the more they strengthen the life of their selves. My thinking is always free from knowledge. How would I ever know whether one or the other action is good or evil? By accumulating goodness, the spirit light helps perfection. The Tao of heaven is supported only by good people." Lao Tzu said, "My Tao means utter serenity. When the intention dies, tranquility is born and life is recovered. More and more life gradually immerses me. All excitement and agitation are stopped completely. I am full of the undifferentiated source of the Tao, enveloped by primordial energy. Its root is increasingly deepened. The 4 limbs are stiff. There is no mind within. I reach the innermost flourishing of the myriad beings, the non-ultimate to which all nature returns. I can do so because I have become utterly empty and free from desires." Lao Tzu said, "Shi, I tell you once again, Master Gu is myself. I shall now return in spirit and go back to the nameless. I give up myself and end my existence. Thereby I live continuously. I leave this world and return to the one source." Suddenly, he was nowhere to be seen. In that moment the office building was illuminated by a brilliance of 5 colors, simultaneously dark and yellow. Yinshi went out into the courtyard, bowed down, and said, "Please, dear spirit man, let me see you once again. Give me one more rule so that I can guard the primordial source of it all." He then looked up and saw Lao Tzu's body sitting suspended in midair, several meters above the ground. He looked like a statue. The image appeared and disappeared, vague and indistinct. His age did not seem to stay the same. He said, "I will give you one more admonition. Make sure you get it right. Get rid of all impurity, and stop your thoughts. Calm your mind, and guard the one. When all impurities are gone, the myriad affairs are done. These are the essentials of my Tao." Finishing this admonition, the image vanished again. Yinshi did not know where it had gone. He cried bitter tears and worshipped it in remembrance. Then he retired from office on grounds of illness. He gave up all thinking and guarded the one, and the myriad affairs were done.